My name is Elena Rodriguez, and at 28, I never imagined that my sister's wedding would become the battlefield where my family's true colors were exposed. Standing in my designer dress watching my parents demand I hand over the keys to my $1 million penthouse as a wedding gift to my unemployed sister, I felt the foundation of everything I believed about family loyalty crumble beneath my feet. When I refused, my mother's palm connected with my cheek in front of 200 guests, and in that moment I realized that blood doesn't always mean unconditional love, sometimes it means unconditional exploitation. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and the revenge that followed, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like button if you've ever felt like the family scapegoat. Don't forget to subscribe because this tale of wedding drama and sweet justice is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss how karma finally caught up with my family. Growing up in our middle-class household in Phoenix, Arizona, the family dynamics were crystal clear from day one. My sister Isabella, 3 years younger than me, was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one, the achiever, the one who would make the family proud through hard work and success. Isabella breezed through life with C-average grades while I maintained a 4.0 gigapascals, worked part-time jobs throughout high school, and earned a full scholarship to Stanford University. The pattern continued into adulthood. While I was building my career in tech, working 80-hour weeks and climbing the corporate ladder at a major software company, Isabella bounced between jobs, moved back home multiple times, and always had an excuse for why life wasn't working out for her. She tried retail, then food service, dabbled in social media marketing for about 3 months, and even attempted to become a yoga instructor before deciding it was too stressful. Meanwhile, I had just received a massive promotion to Senior Director of Product Development, complete with a signing bonus that allowed me to purchase a stunning penthouse overlooking the city. The 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace, and amenities that most people only dream of. I had worked my ass off for 15 years to afford this place, sacrificing relationships, social life, and countless weekends to reach this level of financial success. But Isabella's engagement to Marcus, a sweet but financially struggling artist, seemed to trigger something in my parents. Suddenly, every family dinner became a discussion about helping family and sharing success. My father, who worked as a mid-level accountant, and my mother, a part-time administrative assistant, began making subtle comments about how lucky I was and how Isabella needed support during this exciting time. The comments escalated when Isabella announced their wedding date. "You know, Elena," my mother said during one particularly uncomfortable Sunday dinner, "it would be such a beautiful gesture if you could help the young couple get started in life. You have so much more than you need." The way she said it made my skin crawl, as if my success was somehow undeserved or excessive. I tried to deflect these conversations, offering instead to help with wedding planning expenses or contribute to their honeymoon fund. But Isabella had her sights set higher. She began visiting my penthouse regularly, bringing Marcus along to show him around. She would run her hands along the granite countertops, comment on the view, and make increasingly bold statements like, "This place is so big for just one person, and imagine how perfect this would be for starting a family." The manipulation became more overt as the wedding approached. My parents started talking about legacy and what really matters in life. They painted my career success as somehow selfish, suggesting that I was being greedy by keeping such a large space to myself, while my sister struggled to afford a decent apartment. They conveniently ignored the fact that Isabella's struggles were largely self-imposed. She refused jobs that required early morning starts, turned down positions that didn't offer immediate management roles, and consistently chose lifestyle over financial stability. What hurt most was how they twisted my achievements into character flaws. My work ethic became obsession with money. My financial planning became hoarding. My success became evidence that I had somehow forgotten my family values. They created this narrative where I was the selfish older sister who had forgotten where she came from, while Isabella remained the sweet, deserving younger daughter who just needed a little help to find her way. The psychological pressure was relentless. Family friends were recruited to the cause, making comments at social gatherings about how wonderful it would be if I could help out the kids. Even my grandmother got involved, sharing stories about how families used to take care of each other in the old country. The guilt campaign was sophisticated and coordinated, designed to make me feel like a monster for wanting to keep the home I had worked so hard to afford. But I held firm, believing that setting boundaries was healthy, and that enabling Isabella's dependency wouldn't actually help her in the long run. I had learned through years of therapy that saying no to unreasonable requests wasn't selfish, it was self-preservation. Little did I know that my refusal to cave to their pressure was about to trigger a family explosion that would change everything. The morning of Isabella's wedding dawned crisp and clear with that perfect Arizona sunshine that makes everything look like a movie set. I had spent the night before at the family home helping with last-minute preparations and trying to ignore the increasingly pointed comments about my selfishness. Isabella looked stunning in her dress, a flowing creation that my parents had somehow managed to afford, despite their constant complaints about money. As the maid of honor, I was deeply involved in the wedding preparations, coordinating with vendors, managing the timeline, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. I genuinely wanted Isabella's day to be perfect, despite the ongoing tension about my penthouse. I thought maybe the focus on the celebration would give us all a break from the family drama. The ceremony was beautiful, held at a charming venue in Scottsdale with mountain views and desert landscaping. Isabella radiated happiness as she walked down the aisle, and Marcus looked completely smitten. For a few hours I allowed myself to believe that maybe we could move past the recent unpleasantness and focus on celebrating their love. But during the cocktail hour, while guests mingled and enjoyed appetizers, my parents cornered me near the bar. My father, looking unusually serious in his rented tuxedo, cleared his throat and said, "Elena, we need to talk." My mother, resplendent in her mother-of-the-bride dress, nodded gravely, as if they were about to deliver life-changing news. "Your sister and Marcus are going to need a place to live," my father began, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I remembered from childhood lectures. "Their current apartment lease is up next month and they can't afford anything decent in this market. We think it's time for you to do the right thing and give them the penthouse." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Dad, we've talked about this. I'm not giving away my home. I worked 15 years to afford that place." My mother stepped forward, her expression hardening. "Don't be ridiculous, Elena. You're single, you travel constantly for work, and that place is far too big for one person. Isabella and Marcus are starting their lives together and they need the space more than you do." "They need to start their lives together by building something themselves," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've offered to help with a down payment for their own place, but I'm not handing over my home." The conversation quickly escalated into a full-blown argument, with my parents throwing every guilt trip and manipulation tactic they had perfected over the years. They accused me of being selfish, materialistic, and ungrateful for the family that had supported me. They claimed that my success had gone to my head and that I had forgotten the values they had taught me. "This is Isabella's wedding day," my mother hissed, her voice low but venomous. "The least you could do is make this one grand gesture to show you care about her happiness." "I do care about her happiness," I shot back. "But giving her my home isn't the solution to her problems. She needs to learn to stand on her own feet." That's when my father dropped the ultimatum that changed everything. "If you don't sign over the penthouse today, you're no longer welcome in this family. We're tired of your selfishness and we're done enabling your attitude." I stared at them in disbelief, realizing that they had planned this confrontation for Isabella's wedding day specifically because they thought the emotional pressure and public setting would force me to comply. They had weaponized what should have been a celebration of love into a hostile takeover attempt. "You're seriously giving me an ultimatum on your daughter's wedding day?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're giving you a chance to do the right thing," my mother replied coldly. "The choice is yours, Elena. Your family or your precious penthouse. The sheer audacity of their demand combined with the emotional manipulation and the timing of their ultimatum triggered something deep inside me. I had spent years trying to maintain family harmony while protecting my own interests, but this was the final straw. They were asking me to surrender everything I had worked for, not for any emergency or genuine need, but simply because they believed Isabella deserved my success more than I did. I need some air, I said, walking away from them before I said something I might regret. But as I headed toward the venue's garden area, I could see the satisfied smirks on their faces. They thought they had me cornered, that the combination of family pressure and public setting would force me to capitulate. They had no idea that their ultimatum was about to backfire in spectacular fashion, setting in motion a chain of events that would expose the true nature of their favoritism and ultimately deliver the justice I had been denied for so many years. As the reception moved into full swing, I tried to focus on celebrating Isabella's marriage while processing the bombshell my parents had just dropped. The band was playing, guests were dancing, and the newlyweds looked radiant as they made their rounds, thanking everyone for coming. I forced a smile and played my role as maid of honor, giving a heartfelt speech about Isabella's happiness and my wishes for her future. But my parents weren't done with their campaign. During dinner, they began working the room like politicians, subtly mentioning to relatives and family friends that I had been difficult about helping the newlyweds get established. I watched in horror as they painted themselves as reasonable parents trying to encourage family generosity while portraying me as a selfish career woman who had forgotten her roots. Uncle Roberto, my father's brother, approached me during the salad course with a concerned expression. "Elena Mija, your parents mentioned that Isabella and Marcus could really use some help getting started. You've done so well for yourself, maybe this is a chance to give back to family," my Aunt Carmen chimed in, having clearly been briefed on the situation. "In our day, family took care of family. Your success is something to be proud of, but it's even more meaningful when you share it with those you love." I realized that my parents had orchestrated a full-scale intervention, recruiting extended family members to pressure me throughout the evening. Every conversation seemed to circle back to my responsibility to help the newlyweds, my good fortune that should be shared, and the family values that supposedly required me to sacrifice my own achievements for Isabella's benefit. The breaking point came during the cake-cutting ceremony. As Isabella and Marcus posed for photos, feeding each other bites of the elaborate three-tier creation, my mother appeared beside me with a manila envelope in her hands. "These are the papers," she said quietly, trying to look casual while slipping me the document. "We had our lawyer draw up the property transfer forms. All you need to do is sign, and we can make this official tonight. Think of it as the perfect wedding gift." I stared at the envelope in disbelief. They had come prepared with legal documents, expecting that their emotional manipulation and public pressure would force me to sign away my home on the spot. The premeditation of their plan was breathtaking in its audacity. "You brought legal documents to your daughter's wedding to force me to give up my home?" I asked, my voice tight with controlled anger. "We brought an opportunity for you to do something beautiful for your sister," my mother replied, her tone saccharine but her eyes cold. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Elena." "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly, handing the envelope back to her. "This is insane, Mom. You're trying to steal my home at a wedding." That's when Isabella herself appeared, having noticed the tense conversation between her mother and sister. She was still glowing from the celebration, but I could see the calculating look in her eyes that I remembered from our childhood, the expression she wore when she was about to get exactly what she wanted. "Elena, please," she said, her voice taking on that sweet pleading tone that had always worked on our parents. "Marcus and I really need this. You know we can't afford anything nice on our own, and you have so much space you don't even use. It would mean everything to us if you would just help us get started." The three of them stood there, my mother holding the legal documents, my sister in her wedding dress making puppy dog eyes, and my father hovering nearby with an expectant expression. They looked like a coordinated team executing a well-rehearsed play, with me cast as the villain who was supposed to cave under pressure and give them what they wanted. "Isabella, I love you and I want you to be happy," I said carefully. but I'm not giving you my home. I've worked too hard for it, and it wouldn't be good for either of us if I just handed you everything you wanted." That's when my mother's mask finally slipped completely. Her face contorted with rage, and before I could react, her palm connected with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that echoed across the reception venue. The sound was like a gunshot in the relative quiet of the dinner conversation, causing nearby tables to fall silent and turn to stare at our family drama. "How dare you be so selfish on your sister's wedding day," she screamed, loud enough for half the reception to hear. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay your family, by keeping everything for yourself while your sister struggles." The entire reception had gone quiet, 200 guests staring at our family tableau with shock and fascination. Isabella looked mortified, Marcus appeared confused and uncomfortable, and my father seemed frozen in place, apparently not having expected the situation to escalate to physical violence. But something crystallized in that moment of public humiliation. Standing there with my cheek burning and my family's true nature exposed for everyone to see, I felt a calm clarity settle over me. The guilt, the pressure, the years of emotional manipulation, all of it fell away, replaced by a cold determination that surprised even me. You know what I've been thinking about family dynamics a lot lately, especially after everything that happened at this wedding. Sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who feel most entitled to our success. If you've ever been in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your achievements for their benefit, drop a comment and let me know how you handled it. And definitely stick around for the rest of this story, because what happened next changed everything, and my parents had no idea that their public humiliation was about to backfire in ways they never saw coming. In the days following the wedding, I found myself replaying that humiliating moment over and over again. The slap had been bad enough, but what really stung was the realization that my parents had been planning this coordinated attack for months. They hadn't just spontaneously decided to pressure me at the wedding, they had come prepared with legal documents, recruited extended family members, and orchestrated the entire confrontation with military precision. But as I sat in my penthouse, looking out at the city lights and nursing my wounded pride, something else began to gnaw at me. How exactly had my parents afforded Isabella's elaborate wedding? The venue alone must have cost $15,000, and that didn't include the band, the flowers, the photographer, or Isabella's designer dress. My parents had always complained about money, constantly mentioning their tight budget and modest incomes whenever the topic of helping family came up. Curious, I started doing some basic math. My father made about $60,000 a year as an accountant, and my mother's part-time job brought in maybe $20,000 annually. After taxes, mortgage payments, and basic living expenses, they shouldn't have had anywhere near enough disposable income to fund the kind of wedding Isabella had just thrown. Yet somehow they had managed to pay for a celebration that easily cost $30,000 or more. My suspicions led me to start investigating, and what I discovered over the next few weeks made my blood run cold. Using my connections in the financial industry and some carefully worded questions to family members, I began piecing together a disturbing picture of my parents' recent financial activities. The first red flag came when I learned that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their home 6 months earlier. When I casually mentioned this to my Aunt Carmen, she let slip that they had told her the money was for helping Elena with some business investments. This was completely untrue. I had never asked them for money, and I certainly hadn't been involved in any business deals that would require their financial backing. Digging deeper, I discovered that my parents had also opened 3 new credit cards in the past year, all of which were nearly maxed out. Again, when I discreetly asked other family members, they had been told various lies about where this money was going. Some relatives believed my parents were paying for my graduate school education. I had already graduated and paid my own way years ago, while others thought they were helping me with medical expenses from a serious illness completely fabricated. The most shocking revelation came when I accessed public records and discovered that my parents had established something called the Rodriguez Family Foundation 8 months ago. On paper, this looked like a legitimate charitable organization designed to help family members in need. In reality, it was a sophisticated scheme to solicit donations from extended family, friends, and even my parents' coworkers under false pretenses. The foundation's paperwork claimed that I had been diagnosed with a rare medical condition that required expensive experimental treatments not covered by insurance. According to the documents, the family was desperately trying to raise money to save my life, with Isabella positioned as the devoted sister managing the fund, while I was supposedly too sick to handle the details myself. The whole thing was an elaborate fiction designed to extract money from people who genuinely cared about our family. But the most infuriating part was how they had used this fake medical crisis to position themselves as sacrificial parents, draining their own resources to save their daughter's life. Every dollar they spent on Isabella's wedding had been justified to friends and family as money they were borrowing from their own savings to help with my non-existent medical bills. They had painted themselves as heroes while simultaneously setting up the narrative that I was an ungrateful daughter who owed them everything. I discovered donor lists that included everyone from distant cousins to my father's bowling league teammates. People had contributed amounts ranging from $50 to several thousand, all believing they were helping to save my life. Some of the donations came with heartbreaking notes expressing love and support for my recovery, written by people who had no idea they were being scammed by my own parents. The evidence was overwhelming and thoroughly documented. I had bank records, legal documents, email communications, and even recordings of phone conversations where my parents had solicited donations using fabricated medical information. They had committed multiple forms of fraud, including wire fraud, mail fraud, and potentially tax evasion, all while positioning themselves as loving parents making sacrifices for their family. But what truly shocked me was the scope of their deception. This wasn't just about funding Isabella's wedding. They had been systematically lying to friends, family, and colleagues for almost a year, collecting money under false pretenses and using my supposed illness as a tool for emotional manipulation. They had turned my non-existent medical crisis into a profitable business venture, while simultaneously pressuring me to give up my home to make up for their imaginary financial sacrifices. The irony was bitter and perfect. While demanding that I sacrifice my success for family loyalty, they had been betraying every single person who trusted them, stealing money from relatives and friends who thought they were helping to save my life. They had positioned themselves as devoted parents while committing crimes that could result in serious jail time if prosecuted properly. As I sat in my penthouse surrounded by evidence of their elaborate fraud scheme, I realized that the wedding confrontation hadn't been about family values or sharing success, it had been about covering up their crimes. If I gave Isabella my penthouse, it would solve their immediate housing problem while also providing justification for why they had suddenly stopped asking for medical donations. My supposed recovery could be attributed to their parental sacrifice, allowing them to wind down the scam without raising suspicions. They had never planned to ask me for money because they were already stealing it from everyone else we knew, using my name and fabricated health crisis as their weapon of choice. The penthouse demand wasn't about helping Isabella, it was about covering their tracks and avoiding the consequences of their systematic deception. Now I had a choice to make. I could expose their fraud and watch my parents face serious legal consequences, or I could find a more creative way to make them pay for their betrayal while ensuring that all the people they had scammed got their money back. The wheels of justice were about to turn, but they would turn according to my design. Armed with evidence of my parents' elaborate fraud scheme, I spent the next month carefully planning my response. Simply calling the police felt too easy, too quick. My parents had spent years manipulating family dynamics to their advantage, painting me as the selfish daughter while positioning themselves as long-suffering parents. They deserved to experience the same kind of systematic humiliation they had put me through, but on a much larger scale. My plan required patience and precision. First, I reached out to Marcus, Isabella's new husband, who had seemed genuinely uncomfortable during the wedding confrontation. I invited him for coffee, ostensibly to smooth over family tensions, but really to gauge how much he knew about my parents' financial schemes. Marcus turned out to be completely innocent. He had no idea about the fake medical foundation or the lies my parents had been telling to fund the wedding. When I gently probed about their financial situation, he admitted that he had been surprised by the elaborate celebration, especially since Isabella's parents had always seemed to struggle financially. He assumed they had taken on debt to make their daughter's day special, which made him feel guilty about the expensive venue and elaborate reception. I actually tried to talk Isabella into something smaller, he confessed over his latte. I didn't want her parents to go into debt for our wedding. But she insisted they could afford it, and she seemed so excited about having the perfect day. This conversation confirmed my suspicion that Isabella was either completely unaware of the fraud or willfully ignorant about where the money had come from. Either way, Marcus didn't deserve to be collateral damage in my revenge plan. He was a good guy who had been manipulated just like everyone else. Next, I began systematically contacting everyone who had donated to the fake medical foundation. This required delicate handling. I couldn't simply reveal the fraud without proof, and I needed to document everything properly for maximum impact. I started with close family members expressing concern about the foundation's lack of transparency and asking innocent questions about the donation process. My cousin Maria was the first to express doubts. "You know, Elena, I've been wondering why we haven't gotten any updates about your treatment," she said during a carefully orchestrated phone call. "Mom donated $5,000 6 months ago and we haven't heard anything since. Are you doing better?" "What treatment?" I asked, playing confused. "Maria, I'm perfectly healthy. I haven't been sick at all." "What exactly did my parents tell your mother?" The conversation that followed was illuminating and heartbreaking. Maria's mother, my Aunt Rosa, had sacrificed a significant portion of her retirement savings because she believed I was dying and the family needed help paying for experimental treatments. She had been told that my condition was so serious that I couldn't handle the stress of managing the medical fund myself, which explained why she had never heard from me directly. One by one, I contacted other donors, always approaching the conversation with confusion and concern rather than direct accusations. Each conversation revealed new layers of my parents' deception. They had told different stories to different people. Some believed I had cancer, others thought I needed surgery, and a few had been told I was participating in an expensive clinical trial that insurance wouldn't cover. The consistency in their lies was remarkable. Everyone had been specifically instructed not to contact me directly because my condition was so fragile that any additional stress could be dangerous. This explained why none of the donors had ever reached out to offer personal support or ask about my recovery. My parents had effectively isolated me from people who genuinely cared about my well-being. While gathering evidence and statements from victims, I also worked on the second phase of my plan, creating a comprehensive dossier that would expose the fraud in the most dramatic way possible. I hired a private investigator to verify all the financial information and ensure that my evidence would stand up to legal scrutiny. I also consulted with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases to understand the potential criminal charges my parents could face. The legal implications were serious. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and operating a fraudulent charity could result in federal charges carrying significant prison time. My parents hadn't just hurt their immediate family, they had systematically stolen from dozens of people over the course of nearly a year. But I wanted more than just legal consequences. I wanted public accountability that matched the public humiliation they had put me through at the wedding. So I began planning an event that would expose their crimes in front of the same community they had been deceiving. The opportunity came when my parents announced they were throwing a recovery celebration party to thank everyone who had supported the family during my supposed medical crisis. They planned to host the event at the same venue where Isabella's wedding had taken place, inviting all the donors and extended family members who had contributed to the fake foundation. It was the perfect setup for maximum dramatic impact. All the victims would be in one place, my parents would be positioned as the grateful hosts, and I would have the opportunity to reveal the truth in front of everyone they had deceived. The poetic justice was irresistible. They would be caught in their lie at the very moment they were trying to celebrate its success. I confirmed my attendance at the recovery celebration, telling my parents that I wanted to thank everyone personally for their support during my difficult time. They were thrilled, believing that I was finally falling in line with their narrative and accepting my role in their elaborate deception. They had no idea that I was planning to turn their celebration into a reckoning that would expose every lie they had told and ensure that justice was served in the most public way possible. The trap was set, and all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. The recovery celebration was held on a Saturday afternoon in early December, exactly 2 months after Isabella's wedding. My parents had decorated the venue with gold and white balloons, created a banner reading "Thank you for supporting the Rodriguez family," and even hired a small catering team to serve appetizers and drinks. They were playing the role of grateful hosts to perfection, personally greeting each guest and thanking them for their generosity during our family's darkest hour. I arrived fashionably late, wearing an elegant black dress and carrying a large manila envelope that contained printed copies of every piece of evidence I had gathered. The venue was packed with familiar faces, extended family members, family friends, my father's co-workers, people from my mother's church, and even some neighbors who had contributed to the fake foundation. My parents beamed when they saw me walk in, clearly relieved that I was participating in their charade. Isabella and Marcus were there too, looking slightly uncomfortable but going along with the celebration. Marcus caught my eye and gave me a small wave, still unaware of the bomb I was about to drop. Everyone, my father called out, tapping a spoon against his wine glass to get the crowd's attention. I'd like to say a few words about why we're all here today. The room quieted as he launched into a prepared speech about family sacrifice and the power of community support. He talked about how difficult the past year had been, watching their eldest daughter battle a serious medical condition while trying to maintain hope and faith. He thanked everyone for their financial contributions, their prayers, and their emotional support during the darkest period in our family's history. And now, he continued, his voice breaking with manufactured emotion, we're so blessed to be able to celebrate Elena's full recovery and return to health. She's here with us today, looking beautiful and strong, because of the love and support that all of you showed our family when we needed it most. The crowd erupted in applause, with several people wiping away tears and others calling out congratulations on my recovery. I stood there, smiling and waving, letting the moment build while my parents basked in what they thought was their greatest triumph. Thank you all so much, I said when the applause died down. I'm absolutely amazed by the generosity and love that so many of you have shown to my family over the past year. Your support has meant more than you could possibly know. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, clearly proud of how well their deception had worked. Isabella looked relieved that I was playing along, probably thinking that the family drama was finally behind us. In fact, I continued, I was so moved by your kindness that I wanted to learn more about exactly how much support you've given. So I did some research into the Rodriguez Family Foundation that my parents established to manage your donations. I could see my father's smile falter slightly, but he was still confident in their deception. After all, they had been running this scam for almost a year without getting caught. What I discovered was absolutely incredible, I said, opening my manila envelope and pulling out the first batch of documents. According to these bank records, this wonderful community has donated over $47,000 to help with my medical expenses. The crowd murmured appreciatively, clearly proud of their collective generosity. But I could see my parents beginning to look nervous as I continued to shuffle through papers. The only problem is, I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, I've never been sick. Not even a little bit. In fact, I'm probably the healthiest person in this room. The silence that followed was deafening. People looked confused, glancing between me and my parents as if waiting for someone to explain the apparent misunderstanding. That's right, I said, raising my voice slightly. The Rodriguez Family Foundation is a complete fraud. My parents have been lying to all of you for nearly a year, stealing your money by claiming I had a serious medical condition that required expensive treatments. Every single dollar you donated was obtained through deliberate deception. The crowd's reaction was immediate and explosive. Shouts of confusion, anger, and disbelief filled the room as people began to grasp the magnitude of what I was revealing. My Aunt Rosa stood up, her face pale with shock, and demanded to know if what I was saying was true. "It's all true," I confirmed, holding up bank statements and legal documents. "I have bank records showing where your money went, wedding venues, catering, flowers, and photography. My parents used your donations to fund Isabella's elaborate wedding while lying to you about my non-existent illness." Isabella looked like she was about to faint. Marcus had gone completely white, apparently realizing for the first time that his wedding had been funded by fraud. But my parents were the most interesting to watch. My mother was shaking with rage while my father seemed to be calculating whether they could somehow talk their way out of this situation. "Elena, stop this right now," my mother screamed, her mask of maternal concern finally slipping completely. "You're being vindictive and destructive, am I asked calmly. "Let me share some of the specific lies you told to steal money from people who trusted you." I began reading from my documentation, sharing specific quotes from phone calls and emails where my parents had described my fabricated medical condition in heartbreaking detail. I revealed how they had told Aunt Rosa that I needed surgery that would cost $20,000. I read the email they had sent to my father's coworkers claiming that experimental treatments were my only hope for survival. With each revelation, the crowd grew angrier. These weren't strangers who had been scammed, these were friends, family members, and colleagues who had genuinely cared about my well-being and sacrificed their own money because they believed I was dying. The personal betrayal made their anger even more intense. "I want my money back," shouted Uncle Roberto, his face flushed with fury. Rosa emptied her savings account because she thought Elena was dying. Other voices joined in, demanding refunds and accountability. Several people were already reaching for their phones, presumably to contact law enforcement. The celebration had turned into a mob scene with my parents standing at the center of a very hostile crowd. But I wasn't done yet. I had saved the best revelation for last. "Oh, and there's one more thing," I announced, pulling out the final document from my envelope. "Yesterday, I transferred $47,000 from my personal account to reimburse every single person who was defrauded by my parents. You'll all receive checks this week for the exact amount you donated, plus interest for your trouble." This announcement shifted the crowd's energy in an interesting way. While they were still furious with my parents, they now looked at me with something approaching admiration. I had not only exposed the fraud but also personally made them whole, taking responsibility for my parents' crimes in a way that protected innocent victims. "Elena, you can't do this to your family," Isabella cried, finally finding her voice. "This will destroy Mom and Dad." "They destroyed themselves," I replied firmly. "They stole money from people who loved them, lied about serious medical conditions, and tried to manipulate me into giving up my home to cover their tracks. They made their choices, and now they get to live with the consequences." The final humiliation came when 2 police officers arrived. I had called them before the event, timing their arrival to coincide with my revelation. As my parents were read their rights and escorted from the venue in handcuffs, the crowd watched in stunned silence. The fraud charges stuck. My parents were ultimately convicted of wire fraud and operating a fraudulent charity, receiving sentences of 18 months in federal prison plus restitution requirements and community service. Isabella and Marcus divorced 6 months later, apparently discovering that your marriage was funded by criminal activity puts a strain on even the strongest relationship. But the real victory wasn't the legal consequences or even the public humiliation. It was the liberation of finally being free from people who had spent years manipulating and exploiting me while claiming it was all in the name of family love. Sometimes the people who demand your loyalty the most are the ones who deserve it the least. Looking back on this whole experience, I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. When people show you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. I'm curious about your experiences with family dynamics and justice. Have you ever been in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your success for their benefit? How did you handle manipulation disguised as family loyalty? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love connecting with people who faced similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales of family drama, justice served, and lessons learned the hard way. Your support means everything to me, and it helps me continue sharing these real-life experiences that hopefully help others navigate their own difficult family situations. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging but ultimately liberating experiences of my life. Remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and honesty, not guilt and manipulation. Sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic family members is to let them face the natural consequences of their choices. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never let anyone convince you that setting boundaries makes you the villain in their story.